Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today was a special day for all the big chess fans out there. It was the start of the Candidates Tournament. If you're not too familiar with the Candidates Tournament, I'm going to give you a quick high-level background on what it is. You're going to have some of the top 8 players in the world, so you have 8 players, top 3 finishers from, in this particular case, the Chess World Cup in 2011. You have the loser of the 2012 World Championship. You have the next 3 top-rated players in the entire world, and then you have a wild card that's nominated from the Chess Federation. They have to be over a certain rating of 2,700, so they're going to be a strong grandmaster. And those 8 players play in a tournament. It's usually around 2 weeks long. It's 14 rounds, and they play, and the winner gets to go on and play later this year for the World Championship against the current champion, Anand. So definitely an exciting time. Usually some really, really awesome chess with some of the greatest grandmasters in the world right now. As far as the time constraints, for the first 40 moves they get 2 hours. The next 20 moves they get an hour. After that they have 15 minutes to finish, and then after move 61 they get 30 seconds per move. So in this particular game we get started. It's one of the more anticipated matches. The white pieces are being played by Levon, Aronian. He's the number 3 player in the world, extremely talented grandmaster. And then the black pieces are being played by Magnus, Carlsen, the young 22-year-old who is the number 1 rated chess player in the world. So that's the first match we're going to be going over. But we're going to be going over commentary from a lot of these matches over the next 2 weeks. So we'll not only be adding stuff onto YouTube, but we'll be going over the majority of the games on the website. So definitely make sure you check those out. But this is game number 1, and so we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Levon started out with pawn to d4. Carlsen responded knight f6, white pawn to c3, and then pawn e6, and then you have knight here to f3. And a lot of players, especially high-level play, they really don't like this, knight to c3, and then the bishop coming down here to b4. This is the Nimzo Indian defense. Just gives black so many different options. White really doesn't have to, just doesn't like to deal with it too much. So instead, a lot of times you'll see this knight to f3 instead. Makes sense. Nice strong move, trying to control these dark squares. But black's just going to come down and play bishop to b4. This is the Bogo Indian defense, which plays a little bit differently. It now gives white more options. He doesn't have to play, knight to c3. Instead, the more common move is this bishop here to d2. And for anyone that was kind of watching this game and knows a lot about the Bogo Indian defense, even early on, again, we're only on the 4th move in the game, you could already tell where this game was going to go as far as what both sides were really trying to accomplish, because black has a lot of different options here. One of the more common moves he has is bishop just takes here on d2. The thing with bishop to d2 though is this is typically a very drawless move. So if black were to take here, this usually says, hey, black is trying to go ahead and get this to a draw as quick as possible. He would probably accept a draw right now if white offered it to him. So that's one option. Again, you get half a point if you draw, so it's not always bad. Usually you want to get points, a whole point if you're playing the white pieces. But sometimes if you're playing a really strong player and you're the black pieces, sometimes half a point is okay. But black has other options. He could have tried super creative like pawn to a5. This is always exciting. Or a very popular move now is just queen to e7. Again, protecting this. King can castle very easily right here on the king side. And this is going to be very good. If the bishop takes, which you probably wouldn't right away, this gets a very active queen early into the game, which is going to be hard to deal with for white. In the game, we saw Magnus Carlsen take on d2. And again, this is not a bad move by any means, but it kind of lets you know that, hey, early on, this is round 1. There's 14 rounds in this tournament. You have 2 of the top players in the entire world happen to face each other in the first round. Maybe they don't want to go blow to blow and try the most crazy openings of all time. They may just be okay tying this game. So that's what we see for Magnus Carlsen taking here on d2. The queen's going to recapture. And then black's going to play pawn here to d5. Now he could have, changed up his move orders. He could have, castled on the king side. But, it's all pretty much going to be the same. He's going to play pawn here to d5, and then knight here to c3, just developing their minor pieces. And then black's going to go ahead and castle on the king side. White now played pawn to e3. Makes sense, solidifying this pawn chain right here. Also opening up the door for his light square bishop. Again, he still holds a little bit of lead in development. He has, two of his knights developed. His light square bishop can get involved easily. He has his queen right here, so after he castles, he's going to have his rooks connected. Black's a little bit behind as far as development. He definitely needs to get some of his pieces involved into the game. Next move, he plays queen to e7. So first move, get his queen involved into the game. And now white brings his rook over to c1. Black's going to respond bringing his rook over to d8, adding more protection here on this d5 pawn. He now has a pawn, his knight here on f6, and also his rook on d8. The queen's going to swing over to c2, and then black's going to play pawn here to a6, making sure that this knight's not going to come here to b5, putting pressure on the c7 square. This would have been, again, a nice little outpost for the knight here, also allowing for this pawn to push forward. He wants to possibly get this light square bishop involved into the game, so pushing the pawn forward to b5 and then getting the bishop here to b7 makes a lot of sense for black. White responds with pawn to a3. Over the course of the game, they both kind of mirror each other's moves, which to me is not the most exciting, but that's just my personal opinion. Black now plays knight here to d7, basically saying, okay, I need to get this knight involved into the game. Also kind of blocking off this light square bishop, so more than likely, again, he doesn't want to bring your bishop here to d7. It's not going to do much for you anyway, but this just kind of let us know, hey, he's probably not going to be getting his light square bishop involved right now. He's usually going to be pushing forward, b6 or b5, kind of aggressive, and then get his light square bishop involved here to b7. White now played bishop here to e2, and this is probably the one place where white did make a mistake. He was kind of up as far as his development, and he kind of wasted time here, meaning that black just can respond with taking here on c4, and then after the bishop takes, he just spent 2 moves moving his bishop. Actually, on the next move, he moves his bishop back, so he moved it 3 times. But there was just no need for this right away. Instead, he could have tried something differently. He could have just played, pawn takes here on instead of the bishop coming here to e2. He could have played pawn takes on d5, and then after the pawn takes on d5, then his knight could have come over here to a4, getting ready for a nice little outpost here on c5. Also right now putting pressure on the c7 square, so black's going to have to defend with that. So after pawn to c6, this is actually going to be pretty good for white. Later on, if he can kick this knight off, he can bring his knight here to b6. Again, he can always bring it here to c5. Nice little outpost. So white definitely has the advantage in this situation, but after he plays bishop here to e2, white kind of gives up all of his initiative that he has, and black is able to equalize right away after taking, and then the bishop takes, and then black can just play down pawn here to c5. Now Carlsen could have also played pawn to b5. That's fine as well. That probably makes a little bit more sense. That's kind of what I would have done, but he is higher rated than I am, and he's a lot better at chess than I am. So he played pawn to c5, which is completely fine. Again, just counterattacking the center of the board, and the bishop's just going to come back here to e2. So again, as we talked about, white just moved his bishop 3 times. It's not doing a whole heck of a lot. Doesn't really seem to me, as I watched this, that he really wanted to try to go for the win. He seemed pretty content just playing super conservative, not over aggressive, and then just kind of hanging back and making sure he doesn't get into too crazy of a situation. Black now responds with pawn to b5. Again, this makes sense. He wants to start putting pressure on the queen side, and he also wants to get his light square bishop involved into the game. It's the one piece he doesn't have involved yet. Pawn's now going to take here on c5, and then the queen's going to recapture, and then the pawn's going to come up here to b4. And both sides, you can tell, kind of have the same layout here. They have their pawns are the same. Over here, all their pawns and their knights are the same. The queen obviously has to move, so he kicks it back here to e7. King's going to castle here for white. Definitely needs to make sure his king is safe. And then the bishop's going to come here to b7. All moves that make a whole lot of sense, getting all their pieces developed. So both sides now have completed development. Here on, the 16th move has taken a little while, but both sides have completed development. And so now it's time to figure out, okay, what are these sides going to do? Both of the king sides for both white and black, completely safe. It's going to be really hard to attack either of them. The queen side, if we look at the pawn structure, is exactly the same. White right now controls this C file. Black controls the D file. It's really hard to say that one can really do too much. The minor pieces for both sides are exactly the same, so both sides are really equal right now. Someone doesn't have a whole lot of advantage or spatial advantage, developmental advantage. They are as equal as it gets right now. So white now plays pawn to a4, and then the queen's just going to come down and take on b4. And after the pawn recaptures, pawn's going to recapture, and then white plays the queen down here to b1. Now, this is another place where Magnus Carlsen had a few options. He could, just take it down here on b1, just trying to exchange off his material as fast as possible. Or he could say, you know what, I don't want to give up my queen this early. I still have maybe a last attack inside of me with my queen. Play something like queen to e7. This is completely fine. He's obviously going to lose his pawn either way. He already took material, so that's fine. He'd still be equal, but still has, his pieces that he can fight with. In the game, he decided, again, we kind of foreshadowed this early on, but he took here on b1, and then the rook came over to b1. That would have been a huge mistake if, knight took here on b1, because then after, b4, not only is black up a material, but he also has a passed pawn, and then all the focus shifts towards his pawn on b4. Fortunately for Levon, he played correct, and he took with his rook here on b1. So now the bishop's going to come down and take this knight, and then the bishop's going to recapture. The rook's going to swing over to b8, protect this pawn, but again, there's too many defenders of this square, and the knight's just going to take here on b5. Now the knight's going to swing into e5, more central square. Again, it wasn't doing too much on d7. Knights really reign supreme if they're in the center of the board because they just have more squares that they can get to. So again, if a knight is anywhere on these four squares, they do really well. So centralizing this is going to be good for black. White's going to do the same thing. He's got a nice little outpost for his knight right here on d4. And then black's just okay with capturing. And then after the knight recaptures, Magnus Carlsen comes down, takes with his rook, swing over, take with your rook here for Levon, and then we just kind of have a mirror match right here. After the pawn comes to h6, white responds h3. After this pawn comes down to g5, we have the same with g4. The king's going to move g7, king to g2, and then after the rook comes down, we have a few moves that kind of mirror each other, and then you see the rook come over, knight outpost here on d4, knight outpost on d5, and then the rook's going to swing over to c2. And again, if you look at it, it doesn't take a genius to say these sides are as equal as you can possibly find. So in this particular scenario, both sides decided to go ahead and call it a draw for round one. So again, 31 moves, we reach a equal position, and both decide to go ahead and just chalk it up as a draw, not to use too much of their mental energy and then prepare for later matches. Now these two will meet in a later round. They'll meet in round number 8. In that particular round, Magnus Carlsen will be playing the white pieces, and Levon will be defending with the black pieces. So game 1, to be honest, I was looking forward to it more than probably anyone, besides these players maybe, but wasn't quite what I was hoping for. I was expecting a few more fireworks, but all in all, still excited that this tournament's underway with some great chess hopefully later on. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully y'all are excited about all the games for the next 2 weeks and the commentary that we're going to have going along with it. And I will see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching.